All right, welcome. We're talking a little bit about COVID today. I have some thoughts that I want to share with you. That's what I've been researching lately. These musings are really about sharing with you the things that are on my mind, the things that I'm looking at that are relevant for healing. And so, as we begin to think about the healing process in relationship to these days, part of it is going to be information. So I'm going to share with you some ideas and tools and tips about how to deal well. I'll have another actual website coming up on this and webinar coming up on this. But I want to share some things with you right away. One is that you probably know this. Like, it's probably not a great idea to continually, look at the news and to look at every, bit of news. News is out there to sell their ads, and the way they sell their ads is by hooking you into the drama of it all. And while, there's no shortage of drama for now. There's a serious situation, so you want to be able to be informed. So choose carefully how you get your information and really limit the amount of exposure that you have to that. We have an entire program called the End of Trauma course that will help you with tools and strategies. We'll be launching that. If you would, just go to organicintelligence.org, sign up for the newsletter. It's at the bottom of the page right now. And also at the top is information about that End of Trauma course. Some of the things that I'm going to share with you today are also in free courses like clinical mindfulness. The clinical mindfulness course has information, and also there is a free course, a course that's available called Nurturing Our Well-Being, and that's where we're looking at all the ways of supporting one another, especially for people that are most vulnerable, those with chronic illness. And it's really about that concern for those that are most vulnerable that I want to speak with you today on. Because there has been some important movements, I think, that are really key points as we learn to relate to this age of COVID-19. Key points, key things that are coming out this week. One is about prevalence. And I wanted to share that with you because, you see on the maps of different sites, number of confirmed cases and so on. So as we begin to look at those number of confirmed cases, then we also want to begin to think about something else, which is actual prevalence. What's the relationship between number of confirmed cases and prevalence? And this is really key because the number of confirmed cases is a small portion of the number of actual cases or prevalence that's out there. And I was looking at some of the research that was saying confirmed cases is something like 1.6% of that which is already out there. So the prevalence is actually much larger, is huge actually, in terms of absolute numbers. But this really gets at what I want to talk to you about. And I'll record this. I'll put it up certainly here on YouTube, but then I'll get it into like the clinical mindfulness course. I'll put it into clinical mindfulness, and then with that, I can actually put resources. I can put documents in there. So to get the documents, to get these resources, to get these citations, the bibliography of what I'm going to be talking to you about, if you would sign up for that free clinical mindfulness course, it's on organicintelligence.org. It's one of the banners across the top of the website. Sign up for that, and then I'll put it in like the bonus section. And in the bonus section, you'll see this video, and then you'll see the resources also that I'm going to share with you. Because this is really key. To understand how broad the infection rate is really key right now. And that infection rate, there are several indicators that suggest that the infection rate is something between 3 and 4%. So something between 3 and 4%. And for folks in the United States, that translates into about 12 million people. And 12 million people sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. It's about the population of the state of Ohio, which is the 7th largest state. Rashad, it's just a bit less large than Illinois, which is number 6. But the 12 million number is roughly what we estimate the population infection rate is at this point, the exposure. And that is due to, and the reason it is that, it's 12 million people. That's a big number, but in terms of percentages, it's only between 3 and 4%. That's relatively low. New York is higher. But overall, that 3 or 4% is quite low. And the number of deaths you've seen is significant. There is talk now about loosening the requirements for stay-at-home and quarantining, getting back to work, and so on. And I'm gonna relate that impulse to organic intelligence shortly. And I want to bring this to you because there are resources here that are important for saving lives. So the resource, the first is the information. So you're knowing now that the actual prevalence rate at this point, given the quarantining, the stay-at-home orders, and so on, is between probably 3 and 4%. If we go back to business as usual, it's a tremendous problem because there are people who do not realize that they are infected, and then they are spreading that to others. There is so-called the asymptomatic, and we don't know to what degree there is asymptomatic. You know, it's just, basically it's a question of how dissociated are we. I heard of one family who was welcoming a young person back from overseas, and they weren't showing any, saying, oh, I don't feel any symptoms or anything. But they checked. You know, they went and they checked, and this person actually tested positive. Person who came back from overseas tested positive, and then they checked their temperature. It was like 100 degrees. He had like what's called a low-grade fever, you know, just like a degree or so, but they weren't aware of it. So people who are saying, oh, I don't have any symptoms, they may be having symptoms that are just below their threshold of experience. They just don't realize it. So if we loosen up on these quarantines and the stay-at-home orders, which most people in the U.S. already know is a bad idea right now, then the reports are really significant, and the estimates among the experts are really significant. Because things like this. MIT projected a similar impact from the relaxation of measures, predicting that it would create an exponential explosion in the infection rate. Right? The MIT models suggest that the relaxation of the current measures of quarantine and staying at home would create an exponential explosion. Right? And so that's quite something. The Society of Critical Care Medicine said there are approximately 96,000 ICU beds and 62,000 mechanical ventilators, which is a lot less than we would need if that infection rate currently goes up to 15%, 20%. We're currently at 3 and 4% because we've taken these really significant measures. But if you increase that and you have this exponential explosion of infections, it's going to be a tremendous problem for those that are most vulnerable and on the healthcare system that is already under such massive stress. The burden alone of the grief and trauma, frankly, that's happening is really quite something. So we have this issue, and part of it is, I've talked to emergency room docs, for instance. This isn't related to COVID, but they talk about motorcycle drivers and motorcyclists, and how in the ER virtually every ER doc that I've spoken to has said, don't get on a vehicle on 2 wheels. Don't ride motorcycles because they come in and they are dead or dying, in terrible condition. And they said it's never their fault. It's never the motorcyclist's fault. I happen to drive a truck, a pickup truck. I'm from Kentucky originally. I get to do that. And people look out for you. When you're in this giant vehicle, people look out for you. Big trucks, it's but if you're in a small vehicle, not so much. Why? Because it's brainstem. This is brainstem process. This is evaluation of my risk and the danger to myself, and that's brainstem. This is not cognition. You know, here in Southern California, in San Diego, we have these signs on the side of the road, share the road with bicyclists. And the reason that bicyclists just down this street here on Highway 101 get hit on a regular basis is that it doesn't register at a brainstem level as something that is a danger to a person in a car, right? We are so much more involved with and guided by these lower parts of our brain that are around danger and safety, well-being, and so on. We are so much more influenced by that than we think. The entire approach of organic intelligence is really based around understanding the language of our biology so we can understand the signals that are coming from our own system. Importantly for us, it's the signals that are coming that are important for health and well-being, but it's also signals that are helping us do the right thing. Right, to increase our consciousness, to increase our awareness, so that I can increase my peripheral awareness, including taking care of others. And this whole notion of taking care of others is at the very heart of the organic intelligence approach. We believe that taking care of others is the best way of taking care of ourselves. That is, the best way to heal and support my own system and bring well-being to my own system is through helping others. That there's a whole protocol, a whole understanding about that. And we cannot do that when our systems are especially jacked up and traumatized and responding to nervous system states that include the major survival programs of fight and flight and freeze. So in organic intelligence, we have the end of trauma course that will help you relieve yourself of that. It's called the end of trauma because trauma is a fact of life. And frankly, there is so much trauma happening now that it is off the chain and off the charts. So we're not actually talking about ending trauma on the outside. We're talking about ending trauma on the inside. Talk about ending trauma on the inside. And the way we end trauma on the inside is through also the work and training that I do with therapists. We'll have a coaching course called Heart at Home, an online coaching course where you can learn about organic intelligence as a clinical approach, as a helping approach, and really bring these tools of understanding the language of the biology so that we can actually relieve people of really unnecessary suffering. And to be able to get us out of these programs of fight and flight and freeze. Like the nature of, like the fight response, for instance. The fight response means sympathetic arousal. You've heard of fight and flight, right? This is the energy system that says, oh, I am under threat, so I need to be active and running and fighting. I need to be doing something. It's what's behind, for instance, excess muscle tension. Right? Excess muscle tension means that my system is preparing for action. And in that preparation for action, then I am moving. And that preparation for action in moving then also means that I may have underlying muscle tension. I have residual muscle tension that's happening there because that's what moves muscles, right? They are energized and then they are in motion. And if a system is dominated by, say, a fight response, a fight state, or a fight condition in the nervous system, then my system says, oh, what's relationship in that context? What is relationship from the standpoint of me being under attack or my people being under attack? It's alliance. So I build alliance, and that alliance means us versus them. Us versus them. And so in that sense, I am operating out of a faulty perception of how it's going, because right now is when we're finding out we are all under this threat of this virus. And the them are these tiny little viruses, the COVID-19, right? The beautiful, actually, but hazardous. And as another point of research from this week, we're finding out that it's not just the vulnerable. The folks with chronic illness for whom we have the Nurturing Our Well-Being course with Paula DeMasi, but it is actually everybody. Young people, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, showing up at hospitals or too late showing up with things like strokes, because there is this coagulation process that happens. So the younger folks that are saying, "Oh, I'm going to party on," are also under real threat here, and there's real consideration of the hazard of this. And the problem is, of course, that blood clots are forming. So blood clots are forming, and they're forming in a particularly hazardous way, which is not from the arteries, but toward the veins. So blood clot could form in the leg and then head up to the lungs, and you get pulmonary embolism, which can be fatal, or can go to the heart, which is a heart attack, or to the brain, which is stroke. And so these are known as large vessel occlusions. And again, this is I'll have these citations for you in the clinical mindfulness course where I put this recording. And so those large vessel occlusions in the brain is a stroke. And so this is now then a heads up for those of us that are well, that are feeling healthy. Look at what the symptoms of stroke are, and be sure that if you end up with, or a family member ends up with, numbness of an arm, speech issues, problems thinking or moving, and then consider the possibility of stroke, and that this could be related to COVID. And it's key because clot-busting drugs can be used, but the timeline for that is like 6 hours. I'm not a doc, so again, all the traditional, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, and I'm not giving medical advice. And educate yourself on this. So if you have those stroke symptoms, know that also in your area there are probably hospitals that are prepared especially to treat strokes, and just find out, what are the nearest ones that are available for stroke treatment for you, and avail yourself of that kind of support, so that should you need support, you know where to go and how to begin to really get that support. So the point of this is to bump up folks' brainstem about the actual dangers, because the danger is not about us v. them. It's not other people so much, it's this virus. And the more that we can understand that we are all in this together, then the better we'll be. And frankly, we have to do that together because our government is failing. Our government is failing in its efforts, like to provide support. Not completely, right? You have Dr. Fauci and you have Dr. Birx, and in California we are fortunate that our governor is on this and selected this amazing first Surgeon General for the state of California. So there are many places of great support, and testing is low, antibody tests are not coming out, vaccines are not out. We are going to have to help one another in all of this. And Organic Intelligence is providing all kinds of support. We're providing all kinds of free resources around meditation for families, for this end of trauma course. All kinds of resources coming your way because we really do need to all help each other in this process. And we'll be able to do that better by understanding some of the basics of the OI approach, the Organic Intelligence approach, in relationship to what is trauma, what PTSD really is. So I'm going to do a three-part series. I'm going to do a three-part webinar on what is trauma. But the first thing that I would like to mention is that trauma is really about the way that your biology is responding, and the biology responds in particular ways, and the treatment for this process isn't actually to go back and look at your trauma, to look at your history, to look at what was wrong, right? What's wrong, and the what's wrong attention is called the negativity bias, and we are we are preoccupied with this because that's what our brain becomes addicted to, and and instead our work actually begins by understanding the nature of threshold. That the biology speaks about how our body actually responds, and how our biology actually works to understand and relate to what's wrong. And the key notion about this, and this is why the end of trauma, the key idea about this and the key understanding that we need to have is actually about threshold. And for instance, we work in this area with Paula DeMasi and doing the webinars around chronic illness and support for people in the age of COVID for chronic illness folks, and it's a classic example of how this threshold process works. So you could think of the say a migraine as a kind of model for this. So there is stimulation happening and building in the system of stimulation, and then when it reaches threshold, it then has this migraine. That migraine then creates physiological expression of the symptom, and it reaches its peak in that and then goes down. It in effect burns off that energy, hits that intensity threshold, and then begins to come down. And then it builds over again, and it builds and builds again right up to that threshold, and then pow, here comes the symptom, here comes the experience, the pain, and then it hits that peak, and then it comes down again. And it does that over and over again, and that's classic for us. And you know this. You probably have periods where I'm doing well, and then I'm going to reach a boiling point, and then it spills over, and then I feel better for a while, and then it happens again. It's the addiction cycle, actually. So we train clinicians to see that that's over threshold. We teach tools on avoiding that threshold, and then we teach this other idea, which is there is an ideal intensity threshold that actually grows the system and grows the capacity to not go over threshold and then experience symptoms. So we want to shift the idea of trauma related to content and history and past suffering and past pain, and we want to shift the attention off of that back toward the ways that we can support the human neurobiology to become really trauma safe again. Trauma safe means we're going to be working without necessarily, for clinicians, this is a word for clinicians and helpers, coaches, we're going to be healing trauma not by addressing and not by focusing on the past and on those high intensity experiences, those states of high intensity, but rather we're going to see that there are resources coming all the time. And those resources will help stabilize one's biology and help people begin to feel better and actually begin to shift the quality and the process of the way the entire biology works. We're going to change the system in a qualitative way, and it begins by good coping skills. We have good coping skills for sure, but those coping skills are meant to bring balance into the nervous system itself, into the biology, so that then it can grow itself and heal itself. And this is the takeaway then, is that your biology and mine already knows how to heal. And clinicians that are going to be best are going to be those that are trained, for instance, in this way, in organic intelligence, by understanding how the biology heals itself and joining with nature. It's your nature to heal. It's your nature to grow. It's your nature to realize compassion. It's your nature to embody care for oneself and for others. And that human nature is what can emerge as we work. Look on the Organic Intelligence site, and we're going to see if we can really feel a part of the human family. Let's leave aside this us v them and recognize it's up to us now. It's up to you and I. And organic intelligence and all the resources that we have here, we're making available to everyone who wants to be a part of that process. And many, many helpers are coming. And this is a time where we're seeing really the human family coming together to really work together and to produce care for each other. And we stand in solidarity with everyone. And red states and blue states, we are here to be a support for anyone who wants to be sharing and supporting these days. So look for us on Organic Intelligence. Join our programs. Learn about yourself. Learn your language of biology. It's the language of love for you and for your family and for the human family. And then join us also and look for this video in the Clinical Mindfulness course. Join that. It's free. And we'll be happy to see you there and share the resources that we have. Thanks for joining today. Make some comments. Please like this video if you care to, and subscribe. I'll be back and we'll be talking again about more of these ideas, and I look forward to joining you soon. May all beings